this other story. This is kind of an interesting story. It's actually about a class action lawsuit. You're not going to read much of it, but it happened here in Illinois. I thought, though, it was a good example of the need for consumers to read the fine print, which is, this is what happened with the previous story where
Right.
a consumer became confused. What is going on here is a collection agency called Dynamic Recovery Solutions has agreed to a settlement with consumers, a consumer pool or class, regarding the wording of its debt collection letters. So here's what was going on. Dynamic Recovery Solutions, LLC, is a debt buyer. They buy up what's called time-barred debt. This is debt, credit card, oftentimes credit cards debts. It's still good. I mean, it's still real debt. But the state statute of limitations has expired, so the creditor can no longer take a consumer to court or a debtor to court over it. You can't sue you. If they do try to sue you, you can go to court, say this is out of statute. The judge will toss it right out. So and this does not have anything to do with credit reporting. Credit reporting, that can last about 7 years, but we're talking here about statute of limitations, which can be 2 to 5 years in most cases. Some are longer than that, but 2 to 5 years during which you can file a lawsuit to collect a debt. Well, as it turns out, there's a huge market in buying up debt. It's kind of type of gambling. So what happens is a collection agency will invest in a portfolio of time-barred debt in hoping to, trying to collect on it. So what they will do is they'll start contacting the debtors and say, hey, we have this debt, we've bought it, and we want to collect it from you, pay us. And they will use a variety of techniques to try and get you to pay. What they're doing is legal. What they are doing is legal. It can be shady, but it's legal. But the thing is, pennies on the dollar can turn into big dollars. So let's say they buy a credit card debt for, it was a $1,000 debt. They pay maybe $50 for it, and they get a consumer to settle for $300 or $500. Well,
Right.
That's a lot of blow up your nose. So they can do it that way. Believe me, they work on commission.
Okay, so again, this is a barbaric system that's very legal in this country, and this is people's lives that they're trying to ruin, and it's okay. So what else is happening?
So what happened here in this case, and this is kind of amusing, is that this company was putting a disclosure on its letters, saying that this debt is out of statute. Nobody will sue you for it. What they didn't put on those letters is if you were to agree to a payment plan or agree in some way or another to pay off the debt, because you maybe want to do the right thing, you are essentially reviving the debt and resetting the statute of limitations. So when before you could not be sued for this debt,
Wow.
the second you agree to a payment plan, or make an attempt to pay the debt or to try to work something out, you might be resetting that statute of limitations, and they weren't telling people about it.
Wow.
And I came across this. It's not really big news, but I wanted our viewers to know about this.
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of important. Keep in mind that anytime you get something from a debt collector or a creditor or even a lawyer for same, they're not under any obligation to look out for your interests. I've given you in the show notes some really good articles, including one from the Federal Trade Commission, that can help you out, learn how to respond to this sort of thing, and to, of course, if somebody calls you, don't agree to a payment plan, don't agree to anything until you've had a chance to look over what they're asking for and hopefully get legal advice, just to be aware of this.
So here's my advice. Take your time. You're going to work on OFP, your own fucking program, and you'll get back to them when you want to get back to them, okay? Because let's face it, in this day and age, people are just struggling to make ends meet. The last thing they need is somebody on the phone saying, you owe this money. No, I'm trying to live my life as best I can. Take your time. Read the fine print, you'll be okay. But never, ever kowtow to somebody who's going to threaten you or put out all this other kind of BS. Stand up for yourself. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. There we go. That's a little advice from Kit Cabello right there.
As everybody, I think, pretty much knows, while states are legalizing or decriminalizing cannabis and cannabis products, The federal government still has it on Schedule 1, which I think is really
It's a joke.
funny. But just to make people aware that the FDA is still harassing some companies that are providing CBD products. The FDA doesn't seem to be willing to do a whole lot, but they are sending out warning letters.
Right.
So if you are in a CBD business of some kind, I do want to remind you that while officer friendly out on the streets, not going to arrest you for anything, you may be facing some kind of harassment from a federal agency.
Okay, yeah. So, when I hear stories like this, I just can't help but think of, and of course, Republicans have actually hold this mantra pretty good, but states' rights, all right? And here in the state of Illinois, we have made it legal on January 1st of 2020. It'll be legal to buy and consume recreational cannabis, and there will be a growing cannabis industry in this state. By no means should the federal government come in and infringe on these said small businesses and other entities that are engaging in cannabis, trade and in the economy as well. Should they be infringed on by the federal government? Look, prohibition just doesn't work. Prohibition has failed. The war on drugs has failed. Cannabis is not this big gateway drug. All cannabis is going to make you do, weed is all it's going to make you do is hungry for pizza, and that's it. Okay?
Yeah. Well, this was a company down in Naples, Florida. They produce nutraceuticals and various supplements and whatnot. They're called alternative labs. And the FDA is mad at them because of some of the ingredients that they're using, including CBD. And just a warning out there, just to keep in mind that there is a federal-state thing going on here. Be aware of it. The other thing that I'm finding extremely amusing is Square, which is that company that allows individuals and small businesses to process credit cards, is now opening up payment processing to even more CBD businesses.
Good.
They want to get that share of the market. So this is fantastic. It's an article here in Forbes, which I think is extremely amusing, by Tom Angel. He's a cannabis journalist who has been looking over this sort of thing for a while. This is making me very amused, though, because I remember it wasn't that long ago where if you wanted to use credit cards, your business wanted to use credit cards, you had to go through a massive underwriting process. And now all you just do is, fill out a form. You get a little square that you can plug into your phone, and you're ready to go. So I think that Square is not being Square.
No, boy.
Square's no longer Square. They're going to support the cannabis.
Well, as they should, because the cannabis industry is going to be growing. And look, accidentally in the live stream chat, I talked about pizza. Well, it's the cannabis story. Now everyone's talking about pizza. Maybe put in the live stream chat, hey, what's your favorite type of pizza? Let's get this conversation going. Chicago's #1 for pizza, but also there's another cannabis story. And I'm kind of concerned about this one. Lainey, take it away.
All right. Really good article in here written by a lawyer. This is an opinion by a lawyer, but I think you need to be aware of it. Governor J.B. Pritzker, who has this habit of keeping his promises. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. And for the record, look, for me, the jury's still out on him. But I mean, myself and Daniel Paul have talked about this, and he's been following through with his campaign promises. If he actually, but this has to be done with the legislator. If he actually gets a progressive income tax that happened in the state of Illinois, I will be impressed, and I will actually apologize for every kind of critical statement I made about him while we were on the radio during the 2018 midterm election cycle, because I'm very impressed. But go on, continue with what's going on with this.
So what's going to be happening is that once cannabis becomes legal for recreational use, what's going to happen is that many cannabis-related offenses, criminal convictions, will be expunged from people's records. All right, so that's good, because having any kind of a criminal record can keep you from housing. It can keep you from getting a job. It can have a very negative impact on your life. This attorney here kind of goes over how this is going to happen and what there may be some snafus. And I want to present this story to folks because I think it's important. This is a story called Up in Snoke. Expunged cannabis-related criminal records may continue to haunt job applicants, by Stephen J. Urich, Esquire. And what he points out is that when a landlord or a volunteer coordinator or an HR coordinator runs a background check, they're going to be using data provided typically by a third-party background check company. Those companies are governed under the federal Fair Credit Reporting Act. And the Fair Credit Reporting Act offers numerous consumer protections, but while also holding these credit reporting companies to an important standard, which is the information you report must be accurate at the time of generating the report. So what this means is that in most cases, an Illinois conviction for many cannabis-related offenses should no longer be included in these background reports. And this will not cover offenses that took place, I think, on the federal level, nor do I think it's going to cover it from other states. It's just going to be Illinois, so be aware of that. But it also could mean that this, unfortunately, wrong information or information that should have been deleted and has not been will sometimes crop up on those reports. And I expect that we may see a lot of that, at least initially, while the background companies and the various databases that they use are getting cleaned up.
Right.
To get that information out of there. So I want to let people know that expungement is fantastic, but you're going to have to be diligent about this. The other thing is that if a landlord or a company decides to take an adverse action against you, like denying a rental application, denying a promotion, not hiring you for a job, something along those lines, they are required to tell you, and this is because of something that was on a consumer report, they are required to tell you this, and they're required to give you a pamphlet and a copy of your report so that you can challenge it. However, they're not required to hold up your application until you can get something cleared up. Mm-hmm. So to understand that if that case remains on that background report and you don't know about it and you apply for a job and it comes back with that negative information, you may be up a creek. And while technically the person in taking the adverse action must explain to you why, they may not always do it, and they may say, well, we're coming up with a different reason. So you should be aware of that, and you should understand your rights. And I'm just letting you know about this now so that you can make appropriate decisions.
And I just want to bring a little interesting side note, too. Governor J.B. Pritzker, as well as the Illinois State Senate and House, approved when cannabis was going to be voted to be legalized for recreational use. 800,000 individuals will have their criminal records expunged in the state of Illinois. 800,000. That's going to be divided between Governor J.B. Pritzker's office and the Secretary of State in the state of Illinois. So please be aware of your rights, like Lainey said. But this is pretty historic. And again, I have to tip my hat to the cannabis legalization that was done under the state house Illinois State Senate and House, as well as Governor J.B. Pritzker. He's following through. I believe that the legalization could have been made a little bit more open and relaxed, but it's good nonetheless. January 1st, 2020.
Another thing that can happen is during that, if you're doing a job search process or any kind of thing that involves references, the fact that you've had an expunged record does not mean that, for example, a personal reference that you might mention it, particularly if they're in a bad mood or something like that. That can happen. It's perfectly legal. The other thing is that it's not unusual for HR people or landlords to Google your name, and they might find a media report. If you lived in a town where this sort of thing was reported, they might find a media report. They might find you saying something about it. To be aware that just because a record has been expunged does not mean that people cannot find out about it. Also, I do believe that there are certain situations where if you're applying for certain levels of security clearance, where they're going to be able to find out, and they may even ask you directly if you've had any kind of a case that's been expunged. That'll depend on state laws regarding disclosures on on job applications, but to be aware that that's going on. Another thing is I used to work in an industry where I went to a lot of administrative hearings for people who were trying to get professional licensing after a criminal conviction. One thing I did notice was that a lot of people did not understand the nature of what they had been convicted of. It was very common. And I'm not saying that's in your case, but to be aware if you or somebody that you know has had a criminal conviction, maybe you went with a plea deal or you were told this is going to be expunged, you may want to check on the status of that and to understand exactly what happened so that you're prepared when going in for any kind of a job interview, or if you are believing that that your record is going to be expunged, you may want to check and make sure that's actually going to happen, because not everybody fully understands what was going on during that legal process.